The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Last fall, the Finance Minister promised a balanced budget within 6 years. Last spring, she broke that promise and said that we'd have a balanced budget. Never. And last week, the Parliamentary Budget Officer revealed that her deficit is now 15% bigger than she said it was only 6 months ago. Has the government lost total control of our debt? And how much is this inflationary spending going to add to the interest rates Canadians pay on their mega mortgages?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government will be providing an update on our debt and deficit figures and on our revenues in the fall economic statement in due course. When it comes to Canada's fiscal position, let me also be very, very clear. Canadians should listen to the independent ratings agencies whose job it is to evaluate Canada's position and not the partisan talking Canada down attacks of the opposition. Canada's AAA rating has been reaffirmed by ratings agencies since the budget. We are strong fiscally.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Apparently, former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley is just a partisan using talking points when he says that this government's inflationary deficits are like pressing on the inflationary gas pedal and forcing the Bank of Canada to press on the brakes with higher interest rates. Canadian families have the highest debt load of any country in the G7, and those debts are colliding with the rates that this government is driving up. Will the Finance Minister cancel their inflationary deficits, balance the budget to bring down interest rates and inflation, or will she admit that she's just not worth the cost?
Mr. Speaker, let me again bring some independent, non-partisan facts to this conversation. It is the job of the ratings agencies to determine the fiscal sustainability of every country's fiscal position. And ratings agencies have reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating. And you know why they did that, Mr. Speaker? Because we have the lowest deficit in the G7. And because, Mr. Speaker, we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We believe in fiscal responsibility, Mr. Speaker, and the numbers show it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Nonpartisan voice that I'm interested in is the shipyard worker in Vancouver who told me that his mortgage payment has now risen to $7,500 a month. $7,500 a month for a shipyard worker and a middle-class family. That proves that this Prime Minister, after 8 years, is not worth the cost of mortgage payments. According to John Manley, Liberal Finance Minister, their deficits are driving up interest rates on the back of mortgage holders. Will she reverse these deficits so that we can bring down inflation and interest rates before the shipyard worker and millions of Canadians lose their homes?
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Speaker, talk is cheap, but actions speak louder than words. If these Conservatives actually believed in supporting Canadians during the housing crisis, they would be supporting Bill C-56. Right. This includes a critical measure lifting the GST on all new rental construction that will get more homes built faster. The Conservatives should actually act in the interests of Canadians and not continuing to parrot their talking points, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna, Lake Country.
Speaker, after 8 years, the NDP Liberal government's wasteful inflationary spending is keeping inflation high and causing interest rates to be the highest in a generation. Canadians are facing tough choices, including whether they have no option other than to sell the family home. A Credit Canada representative told Bloomberg, quote, selling the house might end up being the only option for some homeowners. Wow. Last week, I heard of a nurse living in her car in the Okanagan. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. When will the Prime Minister finally stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's fair to ask a question of the Conservatives. When they talk about the inflationary spending, are they talking about the programs that they're actually going to cut that are supporting people right now? Let's look at the measures that they're going to cut that they already voted against. Mr. Speaker, the question was about homelessness. When we put $1.3 billion on the table, they voted against it. Are they going to cut supports for the homeless? When we're talking about removing the GST so we can build more homes for middle-class families in this country, they intend to vote against it. Are they going to cut that too? Mr. Speaker, when we put money on the table for affordable housing, time and time they vote against it. Are they going to cut that too? They are reckless. They are not worth the risk. We are here to support the middle class.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Government that declared victory on inflation only to see it skyrocket.
That's right.
James from Langley, BC told Global News that he and his husband are selling his home as a result of their mortgage payments and returning to the rental market. Mortgage defaults are climbing, with forced sales events up 10%, as just reported by the Toronto Real Estate Board. After 8 years with this NDP Liberal government, people are being forced to sell their homes. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost.
Right.
Will the Prime Minister finally stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share with my honourable colleague that I recently had a chance to sit down with the mayor of the Township of Langley to discuss their application of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which this member and her party is promising to get rid of. We want to be there for the cities to help the very kind of people that she's asking about her in her question, that she promises to cut the support out from under should they form government. Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member is serious about building houses in this country, I would invite her to support Bill C-56, which is going to remove the tax on the construction of new homes, and I can't understand why they oppose it.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of Liberal government, we've seen compulsive deficits and unchecked inflationary spending. As a result, they've had a significant impact on increasing interest rates. According to Quebec's National Institute for Scientific Research, 1 in 5 Quebecers has difficulty repaying their debt and is likely to give up the keys to their home after 8 years of Liberal government. Will this government finally understand that managing things irresponsibly is expensive for Quebecers and all Canadians?
Then I have
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard partisan arguments, but let me give you some facts. Canada's position is responsible. We have a AAA credit rating, and that was reconfirmed by credit agencies. We have the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. But if the Conservatives want to help us with the housing crisis, they need to support our legislation, C-56. That's the reality.